Jack Morrison's eyes opened slowly. His head felt heavy, like someone had filled it with concrete. The air tasted wrong. Too thin, too cold. He tried to sit up, but his body felt like it weighed twice as much as it should. The emergency lights were flashing red. That was never good. Jack pushed himself up from the floor of the engineering bay. His work clothes were torn, and there was dried blood on his hands. He could not remember how he got there. The last thing he remembered was working on the power grid with the Zephyrian engineers. They were fixing something important. Now he was alone. The station was quiet. Too quiet. Jack had worked on the Kethmara research station for 6 months, and it was never this quiet. There should be the hum of machines, the whisper of air recyclers, the soft clicks of computers working. Instead, there was only the sound of his own breathing and the distant groan of metal under stress. Jack looked around the engineering bay. Half the control panels were dark, the other half showed red warning lights. The main computer screen flickered with error messages in the flowing script of the Zephyrian language. He could read some of it, not good at all. "Hello?" Jack called out. His voice echoed in the empty space. "Anyone there?" No answer. Jack walked to the communications panel. He pressed the button for the general announcement system. Nothing happened. He tried the emergency channel. Still nothing. The communication system was completely dead. He moved to the environmental controls. The readings made his stomach drop. Oxygen levels were falling. The air recyclers were failing. The heating system was offline. In the cold vacuum of space, that meant death. Jack checked his emergency suit. The small oxygen tank showed 71 hours of air remaining. That was not much time. Not nearly enough time to fix everything that was broken. The station shuddered around him. Jack grabbed a support beam as the artificial gravity flickered. For a moment, he felt weightless. Then the gravity came back, but weaker than before. The station was dying. Jack made his way to the main corridor. His footsteps echoed in the empty halls. The Zephyrians were gone, all of them. The station that had housed over 200 alien researchers and engineers was now empty except for one human who was supposed to be dead. He found the first clue in the evacuation bay. The emergency pods were gone. All of them. The docking clamps hung empty, like broken teeth. The Zephyrians had run. They had run fast and taken everything they could carry. Jack found the second clue in the command center. The main log was still running. The entries were in Zephyrian, but Jack could understand enough to piece together what happened. The exotic matter reactor had started to fail. The safety systems had triggered a cascade shutdown. The Zephyrians had declared the station lost and evacuated. They had sealed the docking bays before they left. Standard procedure. When a station was declared lost, you sealed it to prevent anyone from accidentally boarding a death trap. It also meant that Jack was trapped. Even if he could fix the communication system, even if he could call for help, no one could dock with the station. Jack sat in the command chair and stared at the status displays. Red lights everywhere. Life support failing, power failing, structural integrity failing. The station was a tomb, and he was the only one buried in it. He thought about Lisa, his girlfriend back on Earth. She would be working in her garden right now, planting flowers for spring. She always said he worked too hard, that he should find a job closer to home. Maybe she was right. Maybe he should have listened. Jack thought about his parents. His father had been an engineer too, working on old combustion engines when everyone else was switching to fusion. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, his father used to say. Simple things last longer than complicated things. The station shuddered again. Jack felt the artificial gravity weaken. He had maybe 70 hours of air left. Maybe less if the life support kept failing. He could sit here and wait to die, or he could try to do something about it. Jack looked at the maze of red warning lights. The Zephyrians had built beautiful technology. It was elegant and precise, like a watch made of light and mathematics. But it was also fragile. When one part failed, everything failed. Human technology was different. Human engineers built things that could break and still work. They built backup systems and backup systems for the backup systems. They built things. That could be fixed with spare parts and determination. Jack stood up. He was not going to die quietly. He was not going to let this beautiful, stupid, fragile station kill him without a fight. He walked back to the engineering bay. The first thing he needed was more air. The emergency oxygen tanks were stored in the medical bay. If he could get to them, he could buy himself more time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to figure out how to fix the unfixable. The medical bay was 3 levels down. Jack took the emergency ladder. The elevator was not working like everything else. His footsteps rang on the metal rungs. The station groaned around him like a dying animal. The medical bay was in better shape than the engineering level. The Zephyrians had built it with extra shielding and independent life support. It was designed to keep patients alive even if the rest of the station failed. Jack found the oxygen tanks in the emergency supply closet. 12 tanks, each good. For 24 hours. That gave him almost 2 more weeks. Jack carried the tanks back to the engineering bay one by one. His emergency suit was not designed for heavy lifting, but he managed. By the time he moved all 12 tanks, he was exhausted and his original oxygen was down to 68 hours. Jack sat on the floor and looked at the disaster around him. The exotic matter reactor was the heart of the station. If he could restart it, everything else might follow. But the reactor was locked down by dozens of safety systems. The Zephyrians had built it to shut down completely rather than risk an explosion. Jack smiled for the first time since he woke up. The Zephyrians had made one mistake. They had left a human engineer alone with their technology. And humans, Jack knew, were very good at breaking safety systems. Jack spent the next 6 hours studying the Zephyrian technology. He had worked with it for months, but only as a repair technician. Now he needed to understand it like an engineer. His life depended on it. The Zephyrians built everything in harmony. Every system connected to every other system in perfect balance. When the exotic matter reactor failed, it sent failure signals to all the other systems. The life support shut down to prevent contamination. The artificial gravity shut down to prevent structural damage. The computers shut down to prevent data. Corruption. It was like a row of dominoes falling down. One failure caused the next failure, which caused the next failure. The Zephyrians thought this was safe. Better to shut everything down than risk a catastrophic explosion. Jack thought it was stupid. He found the reactor control room on level 5. The massive chamber hummed with barely contained energy. The exotic matter reactor sat in the center like a crystal flower made of pure light. It was beautiful. It was also completely locked down. Jack studied the control panels. The Zephyrians used symbols instead of numbers. Flowing curves that looked like art, but meant specific things. Jack had learned to read the basic symbols, but the reactor controls were advanced. He spent 2 hours figuring out what each symbol meant. The reactor was not actually broken. Jack realized this after studying the diagnostic displays. The exotic matter containment field was stable. The power output was normal. The cooling systems were working perfectly. The reactor was fine. The problem was the safety systems. When the power grid fluctuated during the repair work, the safety computers decided there might be a problem. They shut down the reactor to investigate. But the investigation required systems that were also shut down. The safety systems were stuck in a loop, asking questions they could not answer. Jack laughed. He actually laughed out loud in the empty reactor chamber. The Zephyrians had evacuated the station because their safety systems were too safe, but understanding. The problem was only the first step. Jack needed to restart the reactor without triggering the safety systems again. And he needed to do it before his oxygen ran out. Jack went back to the medical bay. The Zephyrians had different biology than humans, but they still needed air and water and food. Their medical equipment was designed to keep patients alive. Jack could use it to keep himself alive. He found the atmospheric processor in the medical bay storage room. It was a small machine about the size of a refrigerator. It took carbon dioxide and water vapor and turned them back into breathable air. The Zephyrians used it for emergency surgery when they needed pure air. Jack dragged the atmospheric processor to the engineering bay. It was heavy, but his emergency suit had strength boosters. He connected it to the station's water recycling system. The machine hummed to life and began producing oxygen. It was not much. The processor was only designed for one patient in a small room, but it bought Jack time. Maybe days instead of hours. Next, Jack needed power. The emergency batteries were dying. The main power was offline because the reactor was offline. But the station had other power sources, small ones. Backup systems. Jack found the emergency fuel cells in the maintenance tunnels. They were designed to power critical systems during repairs. Each cell could run the lights and computers for a few hours. There were 20 cells scattered throughout the station. Jack spent the next day collecting fuel cells. He carried them one by one to the engineering bay. His emergency suit was not designed for this kind of work. The power pack was running low. The joints were stiff. But Jack kept working. By the second day, Jack had enough power to run the basic systems. He connected the fuel cells to the main power grid using improvised cables. The Zephyrians would have been horrified. The connections were messy and dangerous, but they worked. Jack turned on the main computers. The displays lit up with error messages, hundreds of them. The station was reporting failures in every system. Jack ignored most of them. He was looking for one specific error. He found it in the reactor control logs. Error code 7745 alpha. Reactor shut down due to grid instability. The computer had detected a power fluctuation and decided to shut down the reactor. But the fluctuation was caused by the shutdown itself. The safety system had created the problem it was trying to prevent. Jack studied the reactor control software. It was written in the Zephyrian programming language, but the logic was clear. The safety systems checked for problems in a specific order. If they found a problem, they shut down the reactor and started the checks over again. Jack found the problem. The safety systems were checking for grid stability, but the grid was unstable because the reactor was shut down. It was a perfect logical loop. The computer would check forever and never find a solution. The fix was simple. Jack needed to make the safety systems think the grid was stable. He could do this by bypassing the grid stability check. But to bypass the check, he needed to modify the safety software. And to modify the safety software, he needed administrative access. Jack did not have administrative access. Only the Zephyrian engineers had that level of clearance. But Jack was not going to let a password stop him from living. He found the main computer core in the communications center. The Zephyrians stored their programs on crystalline memory cores. Each core was locked with quantum encryption. Breaking the encryption would take years, even with advanced computers. Jack did not try to break the encryption. Instead, he found the diagnostic port. Every computer system had a diagnostic port for maintenance and repair. The diagnostic port had lower security because it was only supposed to be used by technicians. Jack connected his emergency suit computer to the diagnostic port. His suit computer was simple, but it could run basic programs. He wrote a small program that would fool the safety systems into thinking the grid was stable. The program was crude. It would only work for a few hours before the safety systems figured out they were being fooled. But a few hours was enough to restart the reactor. Jack uploaded his program to the main computer. The error messages stopped appearing. The safety systems were now reporting that everything was fine. The grid was stable. The reactor was safe to restart. Jack went back to the reactor control room. He placed his hand on the restart control. The symbol glowed blue under his palm. He pressed down. The exotic matter reactor came to life. The crystal flower in the center of the chamber pulsed with brilliant light. Power flowed through the station like blood through veins. The lights came on. The computers started working. The air recyclers hummed to life. Jack had done it. He had restarted the reactor. The station was no longer dying, but Jack was not finished. He had bought himself time, but the problems were still there. The safety systems would figure out his trick eventually. The power grid was still unstable. The life support was still failing. Jack had saved the station for now. But to survive, he needed to do more than just fix the problems. He needed to rebuild the station completely. He needed to make it better than it was before. Jack smiled. He had work to do. Jack had 3 days before his trick stopped working. 3 days before the safety systems figured out he was lying to them. 3 days to rebuild an entire space station. He started with the life support system. The Zephyrians had built it like a musical instrument. Every part had to work in perfect harmony. When one part failed, the whole system stopped working. Jack thought this was beautiful, but stupid. Jack found the main air recycler in the Environmental Control Center. It was a work of art, crystalline chambers that separated oxygen from carbon dioxide using quantum fields. It was efficient and elegant. It was also broken. The quantum field generator had failed. Without it, the air recycler could not work. The Zephyrians had spare parts, but they were locked in a storage room that required authorization Jack did not have. Even if he could get the parts, replacing the quantum field generator would take weeks. Jack did not have weeks. He had days. So Jack built his own air recycler. He used the atmospheric processor from the medical bay as a starting point. He connected it to the station's water recycling system. He added chemical scrubbers from the laboratory. He built filters from cloth and activated carbon. The new air recycler was ugly. It was loud, it was inefficient, but it worked. Jack tested it by sealing himself in a small room for 6 hours. The air stayed clean, the carbon dioxide levels stayed low. The oxygen levels stayed high. Jack installed 3 of these ugly air recyclers throughout the station. If one failed, the others would keep working. The Zephyrians would have used one perfect system. Jack used 3 imperfect systems. He thought his way was better. Next, Jack worked on the power system. The exotic matter reactor was running, but the power grid was still unstable. The Zephyrians had built the grid to distribute power evenly to all systems. When one system used more power, the grid automatically adjusted to maintain balance. This was causing problems. When Jack turned on his new air recyclers, they used more power than the grid expected. The grid tried to compensate by reducing power to other systems. This created fluctuations that the safety systems did not like. Jack studied the power distribution network. It was incredibly complex. Thousands of smart switches that monitored power flow and adjusted automatically. The network was designed to prevent overloads and maintain perfect balance. Jack turned off the smart switches. All of them. He replaced them with simple manual switches, the kind that had 2 positions on and off. The power grid no longer balanced itself automatically. Jack had to balance it manually. But manual switches could not fail in complicated ways. They worked or they did not work. Jack spent 2 days rewiring the power grid. He ran new cables through maintenance tunnels. He installed manual control panels in every section. He added circuit breakers and fuses and other simple safety devices. The new power grid was crude. It required constant monitoring. It was not as efficient as the original, but it was reliable. Jack could control exactly how much power went to each system. He could turn systems on and off without affecting the rest of the station. The reactor was Jack's biggest challenge. The exotic matter reactor was the heart of the station. It provided power for everything else. But it was also the most complex and delicate system on the station. Jack spent hours studying the reactor. He learned how the exotic matter was contained in magnetic fields. He learned how the energy was extracted and converted to electricity. He learned how the cooling systems prevented overheating. The reactor was a masterpiece of engineering. It was also a nightmare to maintain. The magnetic containment field required constant adjustment. The energy extraction system needed perfect calibration. The cooling system had to maintain temperature within fractions of a degree. Jack could not understand all the physics involved. The math was too complex. The theories were too advanced. But he could understand the basic principles. The reactor was like an engine. It had inputs and outputs. It had controls and safety systems. Jack decided to treat the reactor like an engine. He added manual controls to every system. He installed analog gauges that showed temperature and pressure and power output. He built mechanical safety systems that worked without computers. The Zephyrians had controlled the reactor with software. Thousands of lines of code that monitored every variable and made constant adjustments. Jack replaced the software with hardware. Simple mechanical systems that responded to changes automatically. Jack added a manual throttle that controlled power. Output. He installed temperature gauges that he could read at a glance. He built mechanical switches that would shut down the reactor if something went wrong. The reactor room looked different when Jack was finished. The clean, elegant control panels were gone. In their place were mechanical gauges and switches and levers. It looked like the engine room of an old steamship, but it worked. Jack could control the reactor like a pilot controls an aircraft. He could increase power by pushing a lever. He could reduce power by pulling it back. He could shut down the reactor instantly by hitting a big red button. Jack tested his modifications carefully. He increased power slowly and watched the gauges. The reactor responded smoothly. He reduced power and watched the cooling systems adjust. Everything worked as expected. Jack ran the reactor at higher power levels than the Zephyrians had ever attempted. The original safety systems would have prevented this. They were programmed to be conservative. Better to waste energy than risk damage? Jack was not conservative. He ran the reactor at 90% of maximum power. The power output increased by 40%. The station had more electricity than it had ever had before. Jack used the extra power to run additional systems. He powered backup computers that the Zephyrians had kept offline. He activated manufacturing equipment that had been shut down to save energy. He charged emergency batteries that had been empty for months. The station was no longer just surviving. It was thriving. Jack had transformed it from a dying hulk into a powerful facility. But he was not finished. Jack went to the manufacturing center. The Zephyrians had built machines that could create almost anything. They could make replacement parts, electronic components, even food. The machines were controlled by complex programs that specified exactly what to make and how to make it. Jack studied the manufacturing programs. They were written in a special language that described three-dimensional objects. Jack learned enough of the language to modify the programs. He changed them to make the things he needed. Jack programmed the machines to make hybrid components. Parts that combined human engineering with Zephyrian technology. Simple, reliable parts that could be easily replaced. Parts that would work even if other parts failed. The manufacturing machines hummed to life. They began producing Jack's hybrid components. Mechanical switches with quantum processors. Analog gauges with digital displays. Simple systems that incorporated advanced technology. Jack was rebuilding the station piece by piece. He was making it stronger, more reliable, more robust. He was making it human. Jack had been alone on the station for 3 weeks. In that time, he had completely changed how everything worked. The station was no longer the same place the Zephyrians had abandoned. It was something new. Something better. The changes were everywhere. The corridors hummed with the sound of Jack's jury-rigged systems. Cables ran along the walls where before there had been hidden conduits. Control panels with analog gauges and mechanical switches had replaced the elegant touch screens. The station looked rougher, but it felt more alive. Jack stood in the reactor control room, watching the gauges he had installed. The exotic matter reactor was running at levels that would have terrified the Zephyrians. The power output was steady at 92% of maximum. The cooling systems were working perfectly. The magnetic containment field was stable. The reactor had been running at these levels for a week without problems. Jack had proven that the Zephyrians' safety margins were too conservative. Their fear of their own technology had limited its potential. Jack checked the power distribution board. Every system on the station was getting more power than it was designed for. The lights were brighter. The computers were faster. The life support systems were working better than they ever had. Jack walked to the environmental control center. His 3 ugly air recyclers were working perfectly. The air quality was better than it had been when 200 Zephyrians lived on the station. The temperature was exactly where Jack wanted it. The humidity was perfect. Jack had done something. Zephyrin's thought was impossible. He had improved their technology by making it simpler, but Jack was not finished. He had an idea. A crazy idea that would either make the station incredible or destroy it completely. Jack thought it was worth the risk. Jack went to the structural engineering section. The Zephyrians had built the station with a lightweight framework. It was strong enough to support the original systems, but just barely. Jack's modifications had added weight and stress. The framework was starting to show signs of strain. Jack studied the structural plans. The station was built like a skeleton, a central spine with ribs extending outward. The framework was made of a titanium alloy that was strong but flexible. It was designed to bend without breaking. Jack had a different idea. What if the framework could be strengthened using the same exotic matter that powered the reactor? The Zephyrians had never tried this. They kept their power systems separate from their structural systems. They thought mixing them was dangerous. Jack thought it was brilliant. Jack studied the exotic matter containment system. The magnetic fields that held the exotic matter were incredibly strong. They had to contain something that powerful. But the fields were also very precise. They could be shaped and directed. Jack spent days learning how to manipulate the magnetic fields. He practiced on small samples of exotic matter in the laboratory. He learned how to stretch the fields, how to bend them, how to make them follow the shape he wanted. When Jack was confident he understood the process, he began the most dangerous experiment of his life. He was going to run exotic matter conduits through the station's framework. He was going to turn the entire station into a single, integrated system. Jack started with the central spine. He carefully extended a magnetic field from the reactor chamber to the main structural beam. The exotic matter flowed through the field like water through a pipe. But it was not water. It was pure energy in physical form. The exotic matter merged with the titanium framework. The metal began to glow with a soft blue light. Jack watched the structural monitors. The stress readings were dropping. The framework was becoming stronger. Jack extended more conduits. He ran them through the ribs of the station. He connected them to the outer hull. He created a network of exotic matter that flowed through the entire structure. The station transformed before Jack's eyes. The framework was no longer just supporting the systems. It was part of the system. The exotic matter reinforced the metal, making it stronger than any material Jack had ever seen, but the exotic matter did more than just strengthen the framework. It also carried energy. Jack could tap into the conduits anywhere on the station. He could power systems directly from the framework itself. Jack redesigned the power grid again. Instead of running cables through the station, he tapped power directly from the framework. Every room, every corridor, every system had access to unlimited power. The station became its own power source. The transformation was incredible. The station was no longer a collection of separate systems held together by a framework. It was a single, living machine. Everything was connected to everything else. Every part supported every other part. Jack tested the new system carefully. He increased the power flow through the exotic matter conduits. The framework absorbed the energy and became even stronger. He reduced the power flow. The framework adjusted automatically, maintaining perfect balance. The station was self-regulating. It could adapt to changes without human intervention. It could heal itself if damaged. It could grow stronger under stress. Jack realized he had created something unprecedented. The station was no longer just a research facility. It was a new form of technology. A hybrid of human engineering and alien science that was more powerful than either could achieve alone. Jack went to the manufacturing center. His hybrid production lines were working perfectly. They were making components that combined the best of both technologies. Simple, reliable parts that incorporated exotic matter enhancement. Jack programmed the manufacturing systems to make more conduits, more exotic matter distribution networks, more hybrid components. The station began to grow, adding new capabilities every day. The docking bay that had been sealed was now open. Jack had installed his own docking system. It was crude compared to the original, but it worked. More importantly, it was powered by the exotic matter network. Ships could dock and tap into the station's power supply. Jack added defensive systems. The Zephyrians had built the station for research, not warfare, but Jack lived in a dangerous universe. He installed weapons powered by exotic matter, energy cannons that could destroy asteroids, defensive fields that could stop incoming missiles. The station was no longer just a research facility. It was a fortress, it was a factory, it was a power station. It was whatever Jack needed it to be. Jack stood in the command center, looking at the displays showing the station's status. Every system was working perfectly. Every gauge showed optimal performance. Every warning light was green. The station was alive. It was growing. It was learning. Jack had created something that could adapt and evolve, something that could become more than the sum of its parts. Jack smiled. He had not just survived. He had not just fixed the station. He had created something new. Something that would change how both humans and Zephyrians thought about technology. The station was no longer just Jack's home. It was his masterpiece. Jack was working in the manufacturing bay when the alarms started. He had not heard those alarms in 3 months. They meant only one thing. Ships were approaching. Jack ran to the command center. The long-range sensors showed 5 Zephyrian vessels approaching from the outer system. They were moving slowly, cautiously. Jack recognized the formation. It was a rescue fleet, Jack smiled. The Zephyrians were coming back to collect his body and salvage what they could from the station. They were going to get quite a surprise. Jack activated the communication system. His system, not the original Zephyrian equipment. He had built it from spare parts and powered it with exotic matter conduits. It was crude but powerful. More powerful than anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. Zephyrian vessels, this is Kethmara. Station, please identify yourselves. Jack spoke into the microphone he had installed in the command center. There was a long silence. Jack could imagine the confusion on the Zephyrian ships. The station was supposed to be dead. The communication system was supposed to be offline. No one was supposed to answer. Finally, a voice responded. Kethmara Station, this is Commander Veltar of the Rescue Fleet. You are transmitting on an impossible frequency. Please identify yourself, Jack laughed. His communication system was transmitting on frequencies that the original equipment could not produce. The Zephyrians thought it was impossible because their technology could not do it. Commander Veltar, this is Engineer Jack Morrison. I believe you left me here about 3 months ago. Another long silence. Jack could hear background chatter on the Zephyrian communication channel. Voices speaking rapidly in their flowing language. They sounded excited and worried. Engineer Morrison, Commander Veltar said carefully, our records show that you were declared lost when the station was evacuated. How are you alive? I fixed the station, Jack said simply. That is impossible. The exotic matter reactor was in cascade failure. The safety systems locked down the entire facility. No single individual could repair such damage. Jack looked around the command center. Every surface hummed with power. Exotic matter conduits glowed softly in the walls. Displays showed perfect readings across all systems. The station was working better than it ever had. You might want to update your records, Jack said. The Zephyrian fleet approached slowly. Jack watched them on his sensors. The ships were scanning the station with every instrument they had. Jack could see their confusion growing with every scan. The station was not just operational. It was broadcasting power signatures that exceeded the original specifications. The energy output was impossible according to Zephyrian engineering principles. The exotic matter readings were off the charts. Commander Veltar's voice came over the radio again. Engineer Morrison, we are detecting anomalous readings from your station. Please explain the source of these energy signatures. I made some improvements, Jack said. What kind of improvements? Jack thought about how to explain 3 months of work in a few words. I fixed the things that were broken. Then I fixed the things that were not broken but should have been better. The Zephyrian ships reached docking range. Jack activated his new docking system. Magnetic clamps extended from the station and locked onto the lead ship. Power conduits connected automatically, feeding energy from the exotic matter network into the Zephyrian vessel. Jack heard alarms on the Zephyrian ship. Their power systems were not designed to handle the energy levels Jack's station was providing. Jack quickly reduced the power flow to safe levels. "Sorry about that," Jack said over the radio. "I forgot your ships cannot handle real power." Commander Veltar did not respond to that comment. Jack met the Zephyrian boarding party at the main airlock. Commander Veltar was a tall, elegant alien with silver skin and large, dark eyes. He wore the flowing robes of a senior Zephyrian officer. Behind him were 6 other Zephyrians, including engineers and scientists. They stopped when they saw Jack. He was alive, healthy, and smiling. More importantly, he was standing in a corridor that was fully lit and properly heated. The air was clean and fresh. Everything was working perfectly. "This is impossible," one of the Zephyrian engineers whispered. Jack shrugged. "Impossible is just another word for we have not figured out how to do it yet." Commander Veltar looked around the corridor. "Engineer Morrison, our sensors indicate that this station is operating at 130% of design capacity. How is this possible?" "Come on, I will show you," Jack said. Jack led the Zephyrians through the station. At every step, they became more amazed and more horrified. The elegant control systems had been replaced with crude mechanical devices. The hidden conduits had been torn out and replaced with visible cables and pipes. The sophisticated safety systems had been bypassed with simple switches and manual overrides. "You have destroyed everything," the chief engineer said. His name was Colvin, and he looked like he was about to cry. This station was a masterpiece of design. It was perfect. "It was perfectly fragile," Jack said. "One small problem and the whole thing fell apart. I made it robust." They reached the reactor control room. The Zephyrians stared in shock at Jack's modifications. The elegant quantum control interfaces were gone. In their place were mechanical gauges, analog displays, and a collection of switches and levers that looked like they belonged on an ancient machine. "You have turned our reactor into a primitive engine," Colvin said. "A primitive engine that produces 40% more power than your perfect reactor," Jack replied. Jack demonstrated the controls. He increased power output with a simple lever. The reactor responded immediately, smoothly increasing energy production. He reduced power just as easily. The system was responsive and predictable. "But where are the safety systems?" another engineer asked. "Where are the automated controls? Where are the quantum regulators?" Jack pointed to a big red button mounted on the wall. "Safety system," he said. Then he pointed to his hands on the controls. "Automated control system." Finally, he tapped his head. "Quantum regulator." The Zephyrians looked at each other. Jack could see them trying to process what they were seeing. Their perfect technology had been improved by making it simpler. Their safe systems had been made safer by removing the safety systems. Their automated systems had been made more reliable by making them manual. Jack showed them the exotic matter conduits running through the station's framework. He explained how the structural system and the power system were now integrated. He demonstrated how the station could redirect power and resources automatically to respond to problems. "This is not engineering," Colvin said. "This is madness." "Sometimes they are the same thing," Jack replied. Commander Veltar had been quiet during the tour. Now he spoke. "Engineer Morrison, what you have accomplished here is unprecedented. You have taken our technology and improved it in ways we never imagined. But you have also made it into something we do not recognize." Jack nodded. That was the point. "Your technology was impressive, but it was limited by your thinking. You were so afraid of failure that you never pushed the boundaries. You were so focused on perfection that you never tried to make things better, and you think your approach is superior?" Jack gestured around the reactor room. The exotic matter conduits glowed with power. The mechanical controls responded instantly to his touch. The station hummed with energy and life. "You tell me," Jack said. Your perfect station died from a minor power fluctuation. My improved station is the most powerful research facility in known space? The Zephyrians had no answer for that. The argument started in the command center. Commander Veltar stood with his officers around the central display. They were looking at readings that should have been impossible. The station was producing more power than their entire rescue fleet. Combined, this technology must be studied, said Chief Scientist Marlin. She was older than the others, with silver markings on her skin that showed her high rank. The energy output alone could revolutionize our entire civilization. It is dangerous, Colvin argued. He has removed all the safety systems. He has mixed structural and power systems. He has violated every principle of proper engineering. This station could explode at any moment, Jack listened to them argue. They had been debating for 2 hours. Some wanted to study his modifications. Others wanted to destroy them. A few wanted to arrest him for destroying Zephyrian property. May I say something? Jack interrupted. The Zephyrians stopped arguing and looked at him. Commander Veltar nodded. You are all missing the point, Jack. Sighed. This is not about my modifications. This is about how you think about technology. You are so afraid of making mistakes that you never try anything new. Our methods are proven, Colvin said. They are safe, they are reliable. Your methods are limited, Jack replied. Your reactor was safe and reliable until it failed. Your safety systems were perfect until they trapped themselves in a logic loop. Your proven methods left me here to die, Marlin stepped forward. But your methods are reckless. You take risks that no responsible engineer would take, Jack smiled. That is the difference between humans and Zephyrians. You see risk as something to avoid. We see risk as something to manage. You try to eliminate failure. We try to learn from it. Jack walked to the main display. He called up the station's performance data from the last 3 months. The numbers spoke for themselves. Power output was up 40%. System reliability was up 60%. Resource efficiency was up 30%. Look at the results, Jack said. This station is performing better than it ever has. It is more reliable than your original design. It is more efficient than your perfect systems. But at what cost? Asked another engineer. You have made the technology unpredictable. We cannot model your modifications with our computers. We cannot guarantee they will continue working. That is because you are thinking about it wrong, Jack said. You want to predict everything. You want to control everything. But some things cannot be predicted or controlled. Sometimes you have to trust your judgment and adapt as you go. Commander Veltar had been quiet during this exchange. Now he spoke. Engineer Morrison, your results are impressive. But your methods concern us. How can we trust technology that we do not fully understand? The same way you trust any technology, Jack said. You test it, you use it carefully, you learn from what happens. You make improvements based on experience. Jack paused and looked at each of the Zephyrians. But first, you have to be willing to try. The debate continued for hours. Some Zephyrians wanted to take Jack back to their home system as a prisoner. Others wanted to hire him as a consultant. A few wanted to evacuate the station again and declare it too dangerous to operate. Finally, Commander Veltar called for silence. We need to make a decision. We cannot argue forever. I have a proposal, Jack said. Let me teach some of your engineers how I did this. Not just the technical details, but the thinking behind it. Let them learn human engineering methods. Absolutely not, Colvin said immediately. We cannot allow our engineers to be corrupted by such reckless methods. Then let me teach volunteers, Jack said. Engineers who want to learn. No one will be forced to do anything. Marlin looked interested. What would this teaching involve? Start with basic principles, Jack said. How to build redundant systems. How to make technology that can be repaired with simple tools. How to design for worst-case scenarios instead of ideal conditions. Jack walked to one of his control panels. He pointed to the mechanical switches and analog gauges. Most importantly, How to build technology that humans can understand and control. Technology that works for people, not the other way around. And in exchange? Commander Veltar asked. I learned more about your technology. Your exotic matter science is incredible. Your quantum field manipulation is far beyond anything humans have developed. I want to understand how it works. Jack gestured around the command center. Together, we could create something better than either of us could build alone. Human engineering principles with Zephyrian science. Robust systems with advanced capabilities. The Zephyrians talked among themselves in their own language. Jack could not understand the words, but he could hear the emotion. Some voices were excited. Others were worried. A few sounded angry. After an hour of debate, Commander Veltar turned back to Jack. We have reached a decision. Some of my engineers will remain here to study your modifications. In return, our scientists will teach you about our advanced technologies. But, he continued, this will be an experimental program. If your methods prove to be unsafe, the program will be terminated immediately. Jack nodded. That is fair. But I think you will be surprised by the results. Marlin stepped forward. I volunteered to be part of this program. I want to understand how you achieve these improvements. 2 other engineers also volunteered. Colvin and several others chose to return to the fleet. Jack did not blame them. What he had done challenged everything they believed about proper engineering. Over the next few weeks, Jack began teaching the volunteer engineers. He started with simple projects. He showed them how to build backup systems using basic components. He taught them how to design manual overrides for automated systems. The hardest part was not the technical knowledge. It was the mindset. The Zephyrians were used to following precise procedures. They were uncomfortable with improvisation and adaptation. Jack taught them that sometimes the best solution was not the perfect solution. Sometimes good enough was better than perfect, especially if perfect took too long or required resources you did not have. He showed them how to test ideas quickly and cheaply, how to build prototypes and learn from failures, how to make incremental improvements instead of waiting for revolutionary breakthroughs. In return, the Zephyrian scientists taught Jack about exotic matter manipulation. They showed him how to create stable energy fields. They explained the quantum principles behind their power systems. Jack learned that exotic matter was not just an energy source. It was a tool for manipulating reality itself. With the right knowledge, it could strengthen materials, enhance computer processing, even bend space and time. The collaboration exceeded everyone's expectations. The human Zephyrian engineering teams created innovations that neither species had achieved alone. They developed new manufacturing techniques, improved power systems, and advanced materials. Most importantly, they created a new way of thinking about technology. The Zephyrians learned to embrace controlled risk-taking. The humans learned to incorporate advanced scientific principles into their designs. 6 months after the rescue fleet arrived, the station had become something unique. It was no longer just a research facility. It was a symbol of cooperation between 2 very different civilizations. Commander Veltar offered Jack a position as chief engineer for the entire Zephyrian fleet. The pay was enormous. The prestige was incredible. Jack would have resources and authority beyond his wildest dreams. Jack turned down the offer. I appreciate the opportunity, Jack told the commander, but I think I can do more good here. Jack looked around the command center. Human engineers worked alongside Zephyrian scientists. The technology around them was a hybrid of both civilizations. The station continued to evolve and improve every day. This station has become something new, Jack said. It is not human technology or Zephyrian technology. It is something better, a combination of human adaptability and Zephyrian precision. Jack smiled. I want to help others learn what we have learned here. I want this station to be a place where both our species can work together, where we can teach each other and create things that neither of us could build alone. Commander Veltar nodded slowly. You want to create a school? An embassy, Jack corrected. A place where humans and Zephyrians can meet as equals, where we can share knowledge and build trust. The station became the first joint human-Zephyrian facility. Engineers and scientists from both species came to learn and work together. They shared knowledge, techniques, and perspectives. Jack never returned to Earth. He made the station his permanent home. He continued to teach and learn, always pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Years later, when other species heard about the station, they came to see what humans and Zephyrians had built together. They found a place where different ways of thinking created solutions that no single species could have imagined. Jack had done more than survive. He had created a bridge between civilizations. He had shown that cooperation was stronger than competition, and that diversity was more powerful than uniformity. The station continued to grow and evolve, a living testament to human ingenuity and the power of working together.